sac passe. Let's get straight to the point. I love life, or rather I love humanity, and I argue neither against or in favor of suicide, but instead see it as a situational problem. But I do lean toward against suicide. I certainly wouldn't want to universalize it. Is suicide a selfish act? It's quite difficult to define selfishness under these situational circumstances. Mainly because people who hold this stance hold it without all things considered. In other words, suicide is an ethical problem that dates back to forever. But how do we debate suicide without considering our newfound knowledge of mental health? It's a battle between mental health and old ethical and religious knowledge. I was inspired to answer this question after Lee Thompson Young committed suicide at the age of 29. I've personalized this question as such. If my mother committed suicide today, the last thing I would do is call her selfish as she lay dead in that casket. I'd put my cape on and find the causes, the root of the issues that forced her to that unfortunate state of mind. I'd consider bad mental health as her driving force, not her selfish will to neglect arbitrary, moral, egalitarian obligations to the people surrounding her. I'd find the loophole in her support system that couldn't or refused to see it coming. I'd question myself to see if I ignored any signs, because I know my beautiful Haitian mother would not intentionally hurt me. It's arguably right that children, at the very least, deserve the right to their parents' company. And that parent considering suicide definitely feels the burden, the duties, the obligation to her or his children, and certainly feels a great amount of guilt for even bringing their children into existence. So I'd cry like a baby, like her baby. And to be honest, in the aftermath of her death, I'm not quite sure if I would be a suicidal risk. My threshold, quite frankly, is undetermined. Her death would definitely test it. And with that newfound grief, I would certainly question whether living is meant to secure happiness or meaning for me as an individual or the community at large. As she lay dead, I would not look at my mother like she owed her life to me at all cost. She is not my slave. On the nature of self-interest, if a slave commits suicide, isn't he or she hurting the interest of the master? We are all slaves to a lot of things, apparently even to our peers. Now these aforementioned duties and obligations extend beyond parent and child. That's when our moral and ethical conundrums heighten, and most of our world philosophers covered this. For the common man or woman who says, I can't see why he committed suicide, he was successful, he had a house, or that's so selfish, or that's cowardice, or whatever, you falling into the trap of the conventional argument regarding why people take their own lives. My problem is not your position in the debate. My problem is your lack of effort to understand the other side of the debate. Suicide is selfish. Sure, you're eliminating yourself. But while calling a suicidal person selfish, especially in their face, you're actually giving credence to their self-hate. And you're directly implying that this individual is intentionally trying to hurt everyone else. As if at that moment when that gun barrel is pointed at their heads, they aren't fighting to live. I'm fascinated by themes of isolation, loneliness, alienation, social ostracism. Sometimes one's suffering may outweigh the interest of his or her peers. At some point, living for the sake of everyone else is actually a selfless act. A selfless act. At the same time, within the context of this debate, we fail to mention other types of suicide, especially suicides with purpose, such as altruistic suicide, Japanese seppuku, and martyrdom. And both Christianity and Islam have their share of martyrs. So, according to a health.com article, depression is more common than AIDS, cancer, and diabetes combined. And nearly 400,000 people attempt suicide in the US every year. As much as I'm a family man, and believe me, I'm a family man, family does not unconditionally bring happiness or meaning to the individual. A soldier's post-traumatic stress disorder is a mental problem. It's fair to suggest that civilians suffer a similar trauma, albeit in different degrees. Some soldiers return back to their family, their beautiful wife, their children, their dog, but aren't mentally home yet. Our demons can weigh heavier than others, and there are different thresholds. It's every reason why we attack the bully instead of the kid that's being victimized, that was pushed over the edge, because thresholds are different. It's a sin, it's a sin. No, if you're religious, it's a sin. You can't put everything in God's hands if his hands don't touch everyone the way it touches you. I've selected a few interesting facts that are quite shocking. Suicide rates peak during the spring. You'd think it would peak during winter when it's gloomy, but no, people have energy. Many rich nations have higher suicide rates than developing nations. I'm Haitian. You'd think Haitians would be committing suicide every day in Haiti, but that's not the case. Elderly are more likely to take their own life than teenagers. Suicide is more common among whites in the US than blacks, Asians, or Hispanics, with Native Americans most at risk, right? 2 out of 3 people who commit suicide are depressed at the time they take their life. Alcoholism plays a role in 1 in 3 completed suicides. While 3 times more women than men attempt suicide, 4 times more men than women actually kill themselves. Dying on the whim is not common. That's another fact. Suicide notes are actually rare, which explains a lot. When was the last time you actually wrote a note to express your grievances? Do your own empirical research. In the meantime, I'm not asking what you think in the comment section. I'm asking what you found. Fill whatever void I left in this video. And remember, there is always hope. Seek help first before taking your own life. You belong on earth, and for those of you who lost someone to suicide, try to seek the same exact help as well. Coping with death is a violent resistance, and coping with life is even more violent. One love, peace, and be free. And of course, stay alive. Please, go to the beach or something. It's hot.